The NBA Finals are almost here, and every play could be the one that changes everything. This is the NBA playoffs, where heroes rise, legacies are built, and the action never lets up. And with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, you don't just watch the madness, you live it. Back your favorite team, ride with your clutch time killer, bet on the buzzer beaters, the breakout performances, the game-winning threes, from player props to same-game parlays. This is how you take your fandom to the next level. The New York Knicks, after beating the Celtics, are up to plus 360 as the second best odds to win the title. Surprisingly, the Pacers back at plus 600 because my initial thought on that series is I want to pick the Pacers. But some interesting championship odds right now. New to the game, no sweat. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll score $300 in bonus bets. It's that easy. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's code HOOPS, HOOPS, for new customers to get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. Well, the New York Knicks, with their season on the line, played the best game that they've played in this postseason from start to finish. This is the team that's had a lot of success in this postseason, but it's been pretty uneven. Even their wins, especially in the Celtics series, felt like all of them came from substantial deficits where they played poorly for the most part, but then played great in these short bursts. A wire-to-wire dominant performance by the New York Knicks, kind of changing the way they were defending as well. We'll talk a lot about that and how it translates to Game 6, as well as how it could translate forward to a potential NBA Finals series. Lots of interesting stuff we're going to get into tonight. Then at the tail end of the show, we're going to take 10, 15 minutes of mailbag questions from you guys. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Jackson's doing great work on our social media feeds, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Make sure you guys follow us there. And then, like I mentioned off the top, get those mailbag questions into the chat so that we can hit them at the tail end of the show. Any specific angles of the series you guys want to dig deeper into, anything's fair game. You could drop them in the chat. Also, when we finish here tonight, we're heading over to Playback. That's playback.tv/hoops tonight. That's where we take callers, we watch film, it's more informal, we just talk hoops, we kind of hang out more as a community, and I've been really enjoying those streams, so make sure you guys hop over there with us when we finish tonight on YouTube. All right, let's talk some basketball. So the big takeaway in terms of the schematic difference between Game 5 and Game 6, or Game 4 and Game 5, and again, like most of the case when it comes to situations like this, is just the natural swings of urgency that take place in a playoff series. I feel like we've had fewer of those kinds of swings in this playoff run compared to some recent years. I think that probably has something to do with the overall level of physicality, but this is kind of what happens in playoff series, is urgency kind of oscillates back and forth, especially between two teams that are relatively evenly matched, at least when it comes to their ceiling, like these two teams. And the Knicks just came out with a ton of urgency. Jalen Brunson immediately comes out with the 6-0 run, just obviously bringing the aggression that he wasn't bringing down the stretch of Game 4. Just kind of had a different feel in terms of that intensity. Tyrese Haliburton just completely no-shows the game against some ball pressure. And here we are sitting at 3-2. But what were the specifics? So the Knicks really went with a bunch of super aggressive coverages tonight. Tons of ball pressure, tons of denial, trying to prevent Tyrese Haliburton from even getting the ball. This is something we talked a lot about going into the series, and we did see briefly in at various points throughout the series, especially down the stretch of Game 3 when they got a win. But just out the gates tonight, they were able to get Tyrese Haliburton to be way less aggressive just by bringing a ton of pressure, not just in the denials, but also when he had the ball. It kind of felt like Tyrese was getting rid of the ball just a beat too early tonight, like where he would get downhill on a ball screen and he'd already be jumping to turn around and pass out of it before he's even really threatened in any way as a scorer. And that's the impact of pressure. Pressure makes ball handlers uncomfortable. Another big thing you saw tonight was off-ball denials whenever anybody picked up their dribble, or had a ball in the triple threat. So like if you threw the ball to the high post, or if a guy happened to pick up his dribble because he overpenetrated and needed to stop, boom, everybody was face guarding, denying, trying to prevent those easy kickouts. And just in general, they made Indiana way, way, way more uncomfortable than they did in previous moments in the series. In ball screens, they were blitzing, they were showing up high, it just really getting aggressive on the ball. You could hear Tibbs in that first or second time out on the broadcast when they show what he was saying in the huddle. He was like, aggressive, aggressive, aggressive on our blitzes, on our shows, in our pressure, in our denials, aggressive. The point being, you can take advantage of the dynamic that's at play in terms of the urgency and it being an elimination game. I like the idea of going with super aggressive coverages in this type of game. You're at home in front of Madison Square Garden, and that crowd is just ravenous, right? You're facing elimination, so you know you're going to get a certain level of urgency out of your guys. The refs are going to let you get away with a lot of physicality in this type of game. And most of all, it prevents you from coming out lethargic. These coverages put you in situations where you're asked to sprint and be aggressive, whether that's in a ball pressure situation or just because you're rotating around off the ball after the pass comes out. It requires intensity to be that aggressive. And so it kind of just brings it out of you out of necessity, right? And Indiana really just came apart at the seams. To give you guys an idea, their previous series high in turnovers was 14. They had 20 tonight. They had averaged just 10.5 turnovers per game in this series. They doubled that in tonight's game. That's the level of discomfort they caused. Indiana scored just 45 points in the first half. Remember, guys, first quarter of game 4, they had 43 points. So just two completely different Pacers offenses in the last two games because of that intensity and physicality. And again, like Tyrese Haliburton, as he's known to do at times, and it's been less often in this postseason run than it was last year, but when teams bring super intense defensive efforts, he can no-show a game. And that's what he did tonight. And, when that happens, it's really difficult for Indiana to score effectively. And it is something to keep in mind for Oklahoma City. We'll talk more about that later, should we get to that point if Indiana can close it out. But I thought everyone for the Knicks was great on that, especially on the defensive end of the floor tonight. I specifically want to shout out Mitchell Robinson. He didn't get a ton of burn in the second half as Tibbs went more in the direction of Josh Hart. And Josh, I thought, played well tonight. I thought it was one of Josh's better games in the series. It's kind of like making some of the shots he was missing earlier, grabbing some of the contested rebounds he was missing earlier in the series. Right type of game to play Josh. And there was a couple runs that they gave up at various points. But in the first half in particular, when they were making that initial push, I thought Mitchell Robinson was everywhere. The big thing that really stands out to me with Mitch is his recovery athleticism. You saw a couple of his transition defense sequences where he gets a little too much dip on his chip and he just straight up attacks someone in the air and commits a foul. But again, preventing the easy layup and making the guys actually earn those points at the line. But in general, in every single one of those situations, whether it's a ball screen where he's pursuing or he's in rotation or he's in just like a situation where he's on the ball while everyone else is denying, he just brings this level of athleticism and it just feels like he just engulfs whoever he's going after in those situations. He's one of the most fun to watch defensive players in the league when he's really going. And Mitchell Robinson's an interesting player in terms of how he kind of fits in the league beyond the scope of just a backup center. There are some issues, obviously, in terms of maintaining motor over larger minute loads and whether or not he has the offensive utility to be a factor in a more featured role. But when he comes off the bench and obviously for the last two games in a starting role, and when he's out there in those limited minutes, he just brings this absurd amount of energy, and it can just really be disruptive for their opponent. I thought Brunson and Cat were both phenomenal on offense tonight. Again, Brunson, kind of a classic, we're not losing type of attitude. You could just see it in his body language and demeanor right out the gates. He knew that he didn't do enough down the stretch of game 4. We watched the end of game 4 after on playback a couple nights ago, and it's just kind of weird how Brunson just wasn't looking to be aggressive down the stretch and was just kind of passing out of some situations that we typically see him shoot out of. But he fixed that right away. I mean, we were talking about Nesmith not solving him, so to speak, but really wearing him down over the course of the series. Strong sign tonight that he came out and just straight up bested that matchup immediately out the gates. And he's going to have to do that again in game 6 for the Knicks to win. And then Karl-Anthony Towns, he's been basically unguardable since the fourth quarter of game 3. It seems like it's really clicked for him that none of these dudes can guard him in terms of one-on-one kind of face-up situations. He can just rip through, whether it's right or left, and just power through contact and get all the way to the bucket. And you could tell Indiana's trying really hard to send him to his left hand, but he was able to power through to his right hand several times today and just get up through contact. And he just like rips his arms up through the people that are reaching and grabbing. And he just has a gift for finishing through contact. He was amazing tonight. Really just a wire-to-wire dominant performance for the Knicks. And that, if you're looking for a bit of optimism, it's the first time in this series that they've had that type of wire-wire performance. And the last time they had a wire-to-wire type of performance like that was in Game 6 against the Celtics, if you guys remember, when they really were peaking at that point in the series. And they're going to need to maintain that peak if they're going to have any chance to win Game 6. Game 6 will be the toughest game that New York has played in this series. We talked after Game 4. These two teams, when they're at their best, are pretty similar. You could even argue that New York's ceiling is maybe a touch higher, just because Cat and Jalen Brunson are more reliable as one-on-one players if they end up in slow-down situations than a Siakam or a Haliburton. But the difference is, I know what we're going to get from Indiana on Saturday. We're going to get the Pacers' very best. They're going to come out the gates with a ton of pressure and pace and aggressiveness and energy and all of it. I feel pretty confident Haliburton's going to have a big bounce-back game. Like, they are going to be the best version of the Pacers on Saturday night. With the Knicks, I literally have no idea what to expect this Saturday. And I would imagine most of you Knicks fans feel the same. Like, they're just as likely to roll over and get beat by 30 as they are to win the game. And that's what makes them really difficult to get a read on for this type of game, because we've just seen so many times, even in series that they've won in this postseason, look bad. And for extended stretches. And so it's just kind of weird. I just don't know what we're going to get. But to be clear, I do know that New York can win that game. In terms of the schematics, I would try those same super aggressive coverages again. It's the only time in the series they've had sustained defensive success. Even going back to our playback session last night when we started watching some of the OKC Indiana tape, just in prep for a theoretical finals, there were a lot of... Oklahoma City had a lot of success. They were also able to get Tyrese Haliburton to just completely disengage with that type of pressure. It might just be your best chance to beat the Pacers. And also, it just keeps you aggressive. I mean, like, think of it like this. If you're going to give up a bunch of advantages anyway, because when you're in your traditional defense, you get lost too often, might as well get lost in the context of everybody flying around and trying to pressure the ball and see if it can cause enough chaos to prevent those sorts of easy kind of tic-tac-toe sequences where Indiana gets wide open shots over and over again. I also think trying to bring the worst out of Tyrese Haliburton is the best way to give yourself a chance to win in that building. If you let him get comfortable, I think you're just going to lose. And so, again, ball pressure, denial, same sort of stuff in Game 6. I think you have to lean into that. But again, the Knicks have clearly demonstrated in this series at two different points down the stretch of Game 4 and then again tonight that they can shake Indiana's offensive foundation with their defense. In Game 6, if they do that, they've got a very good chance to win. For the Pacers, it's just about not allowing New York's pressure to dislodge them from their offense. Haliburton's got to shed the denials, be physical on the ball, throw the guy out of the way, go get the basketball. Look to be more aggressive early and often in the game. Don't pass the ball too early out of your attacks. If you pass the ball too early, if the defense hasn't committed to you in any real way, there's no advantage that you're creating. You create advantage by being a threat. You be a threat by looking to get further, deeper into your attacks. That was just completely missing from Tyrese Haliburton tonight. Make the defense react to you. One of the things we saw in film, and this is something that I've talked about a lot in this postseason dating back to the Cavs series, but I really like when Haliburton is getting denied and facing a lot of pressure and he's going through one of those stretches where he's being a little bit more uninvolved. Get him involved in the action. Have him be a screener. We saw some examples of that again in the Oklahoma City tape last night, where in the one clutch game they played, a lot of Nembhard on ball because Haliburton was struggling with Dort. Well, they just used Haliburton as a screener and double drag and stack type of actions to try to keep him involved. And again, like when you are in a situation where you're like hugging, and there were so many examples tonight where like they're showing replays and like Knicks are literally like hugging Pacers off the ball. And again, that's just playoff basketball. That's the kind of contact they've been allowing off ball more or less this entire postseason and in every series. But you've got to find a way to have success in that context. And if you have an on-ball guy, call it Nembhard or Siakam, and you have Haliburton go up to set the screen, and Mikal Bridges is hugging him, Mikal's probably not going to help on screens. And so there's a lot of advantages you can create there by either having the guy turn the corner as Haliburton screening, or if Mikal comes off in any way, shape, or form, he can then slip out of it, and then Tyrese Haliburton has an opportunity to attack with an advantage. But the key is attack from Haliburton. When he does get his catches, when he does get his opportunities, he cannot just completely disengage from the game offensively the way he did tonight. And then on defense, I'm more or less okay with how they've guarded Jalen Brunson. I thought they could have been a little bit tighter on their help tonight. There were a couple of situations where I thought they were just a step late, especially from the low man position. Aaron Nesmith obviously can do a better job staying attached. He's won that matchup over the tail end of this series. But Brunson is what he is, and there's only so much you can do. I'm not necessarily worried about the specific coverage there. With Cat, though, I think they need to throw more resources at him. They have to make him a passer, more aggressive with the double teams, earlier with help. Put him in a situation where he has to make reads in traffic instead of just allowing him to bulldoze his way to the rim in one-on-one situations. Once Cat gets his momentum, he's just a bull in a china shop, and he's going to win that battle more often than not. You've got to put him in a situation where he can't get his runway, and the only way you're going to do that is if you bring early help or doubles. And so I want to see a lot of that in Game 6. Last note on the Pacers before we get to our questions. I'm a little concerned about a theoretical Oklahoma City matchup after a little bit of the film that we watched last night and from what I saw tonight. So we've been going back and forth about this, and I haven't really devoted a ton of energy towards watching all of the tape because I want to wait till we know what the actual matchup is. It would be annoying if I did that and then all of a sudden we're covering a Knicks Thunder finals, right? But we've done a little bit of it. We watched a little bit of tape last night from Oklahoma City, and I've been thinking through theoretical coverages and stuff like that with Jackson. We've talked in segments on the show, and we came around to being a little more positive in terms of just their ability to pass through Oklahoma City's defense and some of their smaller guards and their ability to slide their feet and stay in front of Shea. But one of the things that we saw last night in the Oklahoma City game is Tyrese Haliburton wanted nothing to do with the basketball down the stretch of a game. And they were just going through Andrew Nembhard and using Haliburton a little bit as a screener. And they lost that game in a crunch time situation in Indiana. Now, context there being substantially earlier in the season, basically a different Pacers team. Nesmith wasn't even available in that game. There were several sequences where Oklahoma City was pinching off of Ben Mathurin, and you could tell the Pacers were just a little bit hesitant to throw that kick-out pass because he's not the level of shooter that Nesmith is. And so again, the regular season basketball is regular season basketball, and hopefully over the course of a series, Tyrese would be more comfortable, but it was a little discouraging to see that he just didn't really seem to be comfortable at all operating with the ball against Oklahoma City's defense. The Knicks, they've been occasionally cosplaying as a good defense at various points in the season. They have had no sustained defensive success at all at any point in this postseason or in this entire season, dating from October all the way through to this point. The point being, they are not going to they're not going to be able to reach the level that Oklahoma City can reach on that end of the floor. Point being, whatever it is you're seeing from New York, it's going to be a substantially harder version of it in the finals if you even get to that point. And so, again, step number one is you got to be able to handle this pressure and you got to be able to play Pacers basketball because if you can't figure it out against the Knicks, you have no chance of figuring it out against the Thunder. If I had to pick right now for Game 6, I think Indiana wins and wins comfortably. But I absolutely think the Knicks have a chance to win that series or that game. And I think if they do win that game, all of a sudden they become the favorite to win the series and have a great chance to go to the finals. So if you're a Knicks fan, you just got to think about it in a one-game context. Go win on Saturday, and you're in great shape to go to the finals. Go win on Saturday, right? But you guys know the job. It's not going to be easy. That Pacers team in must-win games at home has been literally a buzzsaw. So I think the Pacers are the safe bet, but the Knicks absolutely have their chance. All right, let's get to Jackson and let's get to some questions.
Let's do it. Let's sort of stay on that game six, how the Knicks would win topic for a minute here. If the Knicks win game six, do you think it'd be more about their defense and the pressure, the turnovers they were able to generate tonight, or more about their offensive success via Cat's sort of continued dominance in Brunson?
I think that the Knicks offense kind of feeds off of their defense. They're a team that I think has been at their best offensively this season when they're running out in transition. So I think they're kind of connected to a certain extent. I'm not particularly worried about Brunson and Cat being able to generate offense. There's a certain amount of like role player shooting variable that you have to factor in. Like, I mean, I thought the 4 jump shots that Landry Shamet and Deuce McBride hit tonight were huge. Like, they each hit a catch and shoot
Yeah.
three, and then they each hit a kind of a tough off the dribble jump shot in the mid range that were important shots. Shamit's was weird. He like jumped way back and almost had his feet on the 3 point line. But like, there's a certain amount of like that role player shooting that could be a variable in that sort of game. But I think it's all about the defense. Like, to put it very simply, the Pacers are a great shot generating machine. And if they allow that machine to operate, they're just going to make the shots and you're going to lose. The only chance you have is to disrupt that engine, dislodge them from their offensive foundation to where they're not moving the ball as well. They're not playing with as much pace. They're starting to second guess their decision making. Tyrese Haliburton wants no parts of it. That's where you have the opportunity to really slow the game down, at least on that side of the floor. And then just pushing off of misses, pushing off of turnovers. And when it comes down to a close game late in the half court, you like your chances with Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, right? So I think it has more to do with their defense.
So you were saying if you were going to finish the sentence in like an old school sportscaster way, the Knicks win game six if they're able to make Tyrese Halliburton
Yes, if
uncomfortable.
they're able to, I think in general, dislodging Indiana from their foundation on offense, meaning like taking away some of the easy transition opportunities, preventing the like, oh, there's 17 on the shot clock and they've already gotten into action and created a wide open catch and shoot situation. Like ball pressure denial, preventing them from getting into their stuff early, making them work deeper into the clock and making them play one on one.
What is your take on the Knicks looking so good and in the last couple games, sort of extending leads with in the minutes with Brunson's been on the bench?
This has been something we looked into in the numbers on playback one of the nights it was like a couple nights ago or something like that. Basically, when Brunson's on and Cat's off, they're good. And when Cat's on and Brunson's off, they're good. And when both of them have been on, they've been a net negative at this point in the postseason. And it's really not all that complicated. There's a simplified order of operations when you have one ball handler on the floor. That dude just knows he's got to be super aggressive, and that can, like any basketball player knows that if you play alongside a bunch of ball handling talent, it can be a more complicated process of like figuring out rhythm. Like sometimes you overpass, sometimes you underpass. Like there's a lot of like, who is it that's looking to be aggressive in this part of the game? Having staggering gives you a situation where it's like, hey, here are the keys to the offense. You're working, yeah, Deuce is out there, Mikhail's out there to run second side action, but we're playing through you. And then it's a simple fact that like every other New York Knicks player that touches the floor is a dude that competes on the defensive end and flies around in rotation. And so if you have 4 of those dudes on the floor instead of 3, you're just a better defensive team. And honestly, that's the thing that stood out in the numbers too when we looked. It's just the Knicks defense with both of them on the floor is just rough.
Yeah, for sure. On the point of the Knicks defense and the ball pressure, that was definitely the big storyline from the night. Um, why do you think they haven't done this earlier? Is it a coaching tip, not his Tibbs philosophy right now? Is he worried about the personnel? Like, what has taken them so long to make this kind of adjustment?
Every basketball team has an identity. We've talked about this a lot with regards to the Pacers and the Thunder. We've talked about it even with like Golden State. There's like certain teams where it's like we have a goal to maximize our talent and grab every little bit of low-hanging fruit, and so this is the way that we're looking to go. But those teams have depth. The Warriors consistently have had, 12 to 13 role players that they've trusted to play big minutes. The Pacers have had a deep bench they can go to. The Thunder have a deep bench they can go to. I think that Tibbs has looked at his team and been like, I trust 6 of these dudes, so maybe 7. So we need to keep their minutes high. And so as a result of that, I can't be asking them to blitz and deny and pick up full court and do all that sort of stuff. Urgency brought that out. But I think another part of it too is
Mm.
like getting to the like I thought Precious Achiuwa's shift that he played tonight was pretty effective. I think he came in late too, but the when he came in that third quarter stretch, like I thought he was effective. The DeLon Wright minutes have been effective on the defensive end throughout the series and the bits that he's been playing. Landry Shamet's been like good, like flat out good for them.
He's been
So like
good.
digging deeper into the bench and putting those guys in a position where they're playing more roles, like 18 minutes out of Deuce McBride, 14 minutes out of Landry Shamet, 10 minutes out of DeLon Wright. That keeps everyone else's minutes down. Cat played 36 minutes. No other starter played over 34. You put yourself in a situation where because you're using your depth, you're more comfortable picking up full court, denying being that physical. I think they would have done it anyway under the circumstances just because of the intensity of the moment. And we have seen in this postseason for stretches, they really ratcheted up defensively and they look great. But I think just going with a shorter rotation has caused the Knicks, and this has been a thing they've done most of the season. Going with a shorter rotation most of the season has put them in a situation where their base scheme has had to involve a certain amount of passivity on the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah, I feel like that sort of speaks to a bit like really shows the flaw in some of Tibbs's thinking. It's like he hasn't even given not that you would, if you were looking on paper, you would necessarily think guys like DeLon Wright, Precious Achiuwa, and Landry Shamet would be playoff game changers. But it's sort of like the moment those guys came in, they were effective. It is a little not an indictment. It's not that's too strong of a word. I don't mean that strongly, but it does sort of illustrate, I think, some of the issues that Knicks fans have with Tibbs. If he plays his starters such heavy minutes, doesn't necessarily give these other guys a chance to carve out a role for themselves, because the moment those guys are given the minutes in the biggest moment of the season, they have been effective.
There's a proven way to make basketball easy that Indiana and Oklahoma City have capitalized on too. What I mean by that is like it's not like if you look at Indiana's roster, how many people were super high on Obi Toppin before he played for the Pacers? How many people were
Right.
super high on Thomas Bryant before he played for the Pacers? Like Ben Matherin's a guy who's been denigrated at various points throughout his young career as being kind of a shot chucker and an inefficient, a guy who can't play off ball. When you put these guys into a system that has simple rules. Here's how we run. Here's what we do on offense. Here's the way we defend. When you put these guys in situations where like any basketball player can be successful as long as they follow these basic rules and these basic reads, you can turn, fringe NBA talent. I'm not trying to say these guys are fringe NBA talent, but relative to what we would consider to be like the types of rock solid playoff bench guys that we've thought about over the years, like Bruce Brown with the Nuggets or, Livingston and Iguodala with the Warriors back in the day, whoever. Like these guys are benefiting from the culture that comes from the top down. So like to your point, like if Tibbs started the season and said, we're gonna pick up full court and we're gonna
Right,
we're
right.
gonna deny and we're gonna be super physical with our ball pressure and we're gonna run in transition like crazy, then you get into a situation where you're running a 10, 11 man rotation from the start of the year. We might look at Landry Shamet and DeLon Wright and these guys, Precious Achiuwa, as like different basketball players in the big picture because they fit into like this scheme. And it's like just Tibbs went a different route. Tibbs went the I want to lean on my top end talent as much as possible. So we're going to be a team that cuts corners on defense all year long. And so guess what? They've been inconsistent on defense in this postseason. It's kind of like, if there's one thing that has stood out to me in a big way, and it's funny because this is something I've always believed. This is something I've always believed, but I just it's at certain points I'll like undervalue it, especially as we've been thinking more about offense recently. uh Getting a team to just play the right way on a night in night out basis during the regular season matters. It just does. And we are looking down the barrel of most likely a Indiana Oklahoma City finals, and I would argue the Thunder played harder all season than anybody, and I'd argue the Pacers played harder over the second half of the season than anybody out east. And here they are looking sharper and getting more of that low hanging fruit and winning basketball games as a result.
Well, next question. Does Cat's dominance in the back half of this series change your thought, your perspective on if the Knicks should trade him this summer?
There's a little bit of a matchup related thing here going on with Indiana, which is like none of their dudes are big enough to handle him. So I think like
Hmm.
there are versions of matchups that you could see on a series by series basis that, like for instance, like let's say that the Knicks made it to the finals. The Thunder are a more physical team with a pretty strong front line defensively now with Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein. It's very possible that he looks ineffectual offensively in a series like that. So like
Yeah,
I don't want to sit here and say that I don't want to sit here and undercut the work that Cat's done down the stretch of the series. He has found out that Indiana can't guard him, and he's having a lot of success now bullying his way to the basket. And that I think matters. But the flip side of it is that everything is matchup dependent, and we just have so many examples over the years of Cat kind of struggling. And here's the thing, guys, let's see how Cat defends in game 6. Like it's a big important game on the road, must win elimination game. Like if he goes out in game 6 and he defends the way that he needs to defend and he puts in 25 and 15, then yeah, we can start having a different conversation, as he's now done it in a high stakes situation to put himself in a situation where he can go to the finals. But like to this point, if we like really zoom out from this postseason, it's been a little bit more complicated than just here are his points per game totals.
for sure. Last question before we go over to playback. The DraftKings line on game 6 is Pacers -4. I'm going to put you on the spot. Who is going to win games? If you had to pick right now, who is going
I
to win
think the
game
Pacers will
6?
win and they'll cover. I think I didn't pick the Pacers over the Knicks because of like anti-Knicks anything or any sort of like even matchup related stuff. I just think the Pacers are a better team. I think they're a better team on both ends of the floor because they're more consistently at their ceiling. I do think the Knicks can win that game, but I just think the Pacers are a safer bet because they've demonstrated that throughout this season. They have also just been consistently an absolute buzzsaw in like must-win games at home, and I just think that's going to be one of the most difficult games that you could ever ask a team to win is go on the road to Indiana. They get to go to the finals if they win. like like
Yeah,
it's gonna be rough. And so again, it's not that I don't think the Knicks can win. I just think the Pacers are far and away the safe bet, and I think it's more likely than not that they win big. Like I'd be looking at alternate spread bets in a game like that.
mm,
All right, guys, that's all I have for tonight. Again, we're heading over to Playback. So that's playback.tv/hoops tonight. We'll be taking callers and hanging out and having fun. Make sure you guys head over there. For those of you guys who are not following us, we'll be back on YouTube Saturday night. We've got we've got 38 of the last 41 nights, but we are finally done going every night. So we will be back on Saturday night for game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Pacers and the Knicks. I will see you guys then.